What's the dumbest myth people today actually believe? The dumbest one that's coming to my mind is we swallow 8 spiders per year in our sleep. Just saw that on TikTok, researched it, and turns out it's untrue. What other similar stuff do people believe that's completely untrue? That fish have no memory. Some fish, they can remember months, and a channel catfish can remember the sound of a human announcing food for up to 5 years after last hearing it. My uncle had an Oscar and swear they had a whole routine. I never seen a fish get so excited to see a human like that. Once my uncle passed, the Oscar went into a deep depression until he eventually died a year later. He wouldn't adapt to us feeding him or the usual cleanings and stuff. It was wild. Everything I was taught about fish went out the window with that experience. We have a pet Oscar, and we call him our third dog. We have 2 dogs. He has favorite people, and he follows us the length of his tank when we walk past. I feed him veggies from my plate, so he sits next to me at dinner time waiting for scraps. He's like having a weird, water-bound dog. Never knew fish could be like this. I always just thought brainless, I guess. Only have a functional brain for living. This just blows my mind. Many years ago, I had a 120-gallon tank with 2 fish in it. ARF/TPS/EN wikipedia.org /heterotilapia butycophori and A with wikipedia.org Leporhinus fasciatus lepornius. The 2 of them would play tug-of-war with algae sheets. One would grab it and run to its side of the tank, then the other would yank it back and go to their end. They would do this over and over again. The butycophori loved to play with floating balls in the water, knocking them all over the place. Its favorite chew toy, however, was the heater. It would take one of them, smash it against the wall, then grab it in its mouth and thrash around with it, apparently enjoying being electrocuted. I'd unplug the heater and it would stop, shake it a couple more times, then spit it out, plug it back in, and he dives right back in for round 2. So they were smart, but also crazy, lol. Everyone told me that they would never get along. Typically with butycophori, you had to have either a single fish or at least 4 to 5 together to temper aggression. My 2 boys, however, got along swimmingly. I'm going to eventually get another tank, but it's just going to be a very small one. Right next to the 120, I used to have a 2.5 gal tank with a betta and a small school of neon tetras. It was a very active tank, but I may go up to 5 gal next time for that. Swimmingly. Block 3. 3. I see what OP did there. Ideally, for the beta tank plus tetras, you'll get an 8 to 10 gallon. My single beta and an Amano shrimp planted tank is 5 gal. It's so wild to me that people think fish are dumb. They had brains before mammals existed. Hell, they had brains before reptiles existed, before life on land existed at all. They've had brains for so long that it's kind of wild to imagine they never evolved a way to use them. I think it's cause of the face and eyes. They don't have very expressive faces like dogs and cats. Dogs and cats can wiggle ears and move their lips and make noises. Fish can't really do stuff with their face, so people can't easily read their emotions like we can with other animals. But fish absolutely have emotions and personalities. I think a big part of it is that we tend to understand intelligence by how something interacts with its environment. And fish's environment is so wildly different from our own that we sometimes fail to understand what intelligence looks like for them. This is exactly why I sometimes wonder if we would even be able to comprehend an alien intelligent being, even if it was already here on Earth. Cough, cough, octopus, cough, cuff. You know what? I'd believe it. People even say similar things about cats not being smart or not having personalities just because they aren't as expressive as dogs. But I've got 3 cats, ATM, and they have very, very clear and distinct personalities. And they can communicate with us just as much as a dog. They're just more subtle about it until they feel comfortable around people. I'm not sure how more unsubtle my cats could be. You know exactly what they are thinking and feeling at all times. Anyone who thinks cats don't communicate is a weirdo. Cats won't do everything you want them to, but they certainly communicate and let their wishes and wants known. My cat likes to play fetch and will put toys beside me in my bed at night because she apparently thinks 3 a.m. is the perfect time to bat the fishing pole around. When mine was younger, she'd bring me the laser pointer first thing in the morning. People just say that shit to make themselves feel better about their hobby of shoving a barbed spike through the fish's mouth to rip it out of the water and pose for a picture while it suffocates. Agreed, I used to have cichlids. You can definitely tell when fish are stressed and not happy. I only had them for a couple years before I felt bad for the fish not having an ideal living situation and gave them up. Well, a lot of people do buy them and just put them in a tank with the bare minimum. It's only those who take the time to provide enrichment that see what they are truly capable of. Same with snakes. If I give my rattlesnakes enrichment feedings, like putting a rat in a maze, I can observe behaviors that other people rarely see. Honestly, all animals are a lot smarter than we think. My friend had one just like that. He'd follow you as far as he could in his tank and then start doing circles and going up and down to try and get your attention. He enjoyed being touched, but I was never brave enough. What a cutie. My mom's 2 Oscars would come to me if I knelt before their tank. When I placed my hands on it and sang, they would come straight to my hands, but no one else's. Guess whose job it was to feed and maintain them? That is sweet and sad. Oscars are by far the coolest fish. They are so much like dogs. We've had several over the years, and they've all had their own personalities. Had hundreds of other fish in our 35 years together, but none were as cool as those guys. My Oscars loved to be pet. They would come to the top of the tank and lay on their sides so you could pet them with your whole hand. Oscars will absolutely spoil you if you get into fish. They are very humor responsive. I had 3 in a 75-gallon tank years ago and was out on a business trip with a buddy checking on them once a day for me. When I got home and walked in the door, I went over to the tank. These fish are like dogs, I swear. 2 were excitedly swimming around the side nearest the door. The third was at the bottom on a rock dead. Bummed, I went to put my suitcase in my room and use the restroom before I got the dead one out of the tank. When I got back to the tank, the dead one was up and swimming around. It had been playing dead. Unfortunately, I was traveling a lot at the time, and while I had 2 filters on the tank, one was a waterfall filter that was less about replacing oxygen in the water and more about maintaining bacteria. And it was a tube pump filter that cycled and oxygenated the water. My buddy didn't notice or know that the tube pump filter got clogged, and I came home to all of them dead. I was so heartbroken that I got rid of the tank when I moved and swore I wouldn't do fish again until I was home more often. If I ever do another tank, I'll absolutely do Oscars again. Also, the general belief that fish as a whole make low-maintenance pets. Lol, no. Goldfish in tiny-ass fish bowls make my blood boil. Do people know they can grow to the size of a laptop? Bettas in tiny, unheated cups gets on my nerves, too. They can't regulate their body temperature. That's like keeping someone in a 10 degrees room, no space to live, nowhere cozy to snuggle into. Plus, they have to live in piss water since the water's unfiltered. And when the water's changed, it's got chemicals in it, so it's like smelling a constant gas leak, which of course leads to health problems after a while. Amusingly, for years, maybe decades, I never understood the need to get a heater for bettas, or any other fish for that matter. I just couldn't get it to compute in my head why I'd need to get a heater. It was only like a couple years ago that it clicked. Oh, those guides are written for people in temperate climates, not for those of us in the middle of a tropical jungle. This is why my sew hooks the hoses and sprinklers up in the dead of winter to water the grass, negating my winterization. Some HGTV show years ago was pumping out yard tips specific to warm southern Cali climates only, but neglected to mention that important tidbit. That info burrowed deep into my sew's brain and it will not come out. I just have to deal with frozen, busted taps and shrug my shoulders at my inquisitive neighbors every winter. He never wondered why other people don't have busted taps. My mom would rip me a new one if I didn't turn off the one for the hose. Maybe invite the neighborhood kids over for a hockey game. And my dumbass uncle who bought like 5 male bettas back in the 90s because they look cool and then put them all in the same tank. Male bettas can in fact be kept together. They just need to be in very large aquariums, and you want at least 5 or 6, not 2. A 6-foot 125 that is heavily planted and aquascaped so that there are a lot of sight breaks and hiding spots can house a small group. You also want to make sure there are a lot of other fish in the tank too. Yeah, he did none of that though. Oh, I am sure he just dropped them in a 5-gallon tank, watched Thunderdome take place. I had a pair of male wild ram cichlids in one tank that was 60 gallons and had all kinds of plants and sight breaks. Most of the time, the little guys would just swim around happily, but occasionally they would square off in the center of the tank. Flared fins, bluff charges, and then they'd swim back to their own 30-gallon territory. I think if they could talk, they'd be saying, "I showed him." My partner told me that all his childhood goldfish died. When we got together, we got goldfish, and his mother yelled at him and said, "Your goldfish need to be in the sun." Now I know why they died. We have had goldfish for more than 4 years now. Edit, me not him, lol. Feel the same with birds. Let the wee fellas fly. Hamsters and bunnies too. People still leaving their bunnies alone in a way too small cage in the living room 22 hours per day, and still buying unsafe hamster toys and tiny cages with no option to dig. Anytime I see a rabbit in a small cage, it makes me so angry. Or when a parent buys their kid a rabbit for Easter without any research into how to take care of them. Rabbits are a lot of work and a big commitment, too much commitment for a 5-year-old to handle. Maybe when they are a little bit older, but parents, please, if you want to get your young child a pet, consider getting a dog or a cat instead and help them take care of it. This was my findings when looking for a pet. Rabbits seemed to be something small and easy. All the advice kept showing the amount of space and attention they needed. In the end, a cat was a hell of a lot easier, as they do most stuff entirely themselves. Bed is a basket or someone's lap. They do their own toilet in a litter tray. Food you put out, and they eat it. Things like shots or vet trips aren't any different to rabbits. About 24 years ago, my mom got my sister, who was 9 at the time, a turtle. She didn't know the life expectancy. I took the turtle when she couldn't care for her. I still have her. Rabbits are also not easy to take care of. My other sister got one as a gift from her creepy friend, which I ended up taking care of. He lived until he was 17, and feeding bunnies nothing but carrots. Because that's what cartoon rabbits do, so it should be fine, right? I've known too many people who've killed their rabbits that way. I blame Clark Gable. Well, to be fair to Clark Gable, I don't think he knew someone would take a scene from one of his movies and make a cartoon rabbit imitate it. Then that would go on to be taken seriously enough that other people would assume that real rabbits eat carrots all the time. My hamster cage cost $400. It's a McMansion. Lol. I love my hamster and she's treated very well. It's an expensive pet to set up. They are not for small children. Or people keeping fish, usually way too many, in way too small tanks, with 0 plants, hiding options or anything, just some gravel on the bottom for the aesthetic. They're just fish, they can't get stressed. Yes, they fucking can, bruh. Those guys can get so stressed they just straight up die. Why are these people even buying an animal if they don't want to do anything to take care of it? The one that really bothers me most is thinking it's fine to put betta fish in those 1 or 2 gallon micro tanks, or a fucking vase. The fact that people will buy an animal and not do any research on its needs or how to keep it happy and healthy drives me bonkers. They need live plants and very clean water. This is an actual commitment. Stop giving them to children as practice pets because they're not. I've owned 3 different betta fish, and these guys live a really long time. They need space to roam and places to rest or hide, and if you don't put a lid on the tank, they absolutely will jump out to their deaths. I don't know why, but they will. My mom left the lid off my tank when I was in high school, and my boy almost died. But my main point still stands, and it really goes for basically all animals, because people will buy dog breeds that are not meant for the environment they're putting them in. You can't put an Australian Shepherd in your studio apartment and give them one short walk a day. You can't buy a cute baby bunny or chick for Easter and think you haven't just made a massive commitment. Why would you not research an animal's needs or how long they can live? God, I forgot how mad I get about this, but once I started Googling betta fish tank and saw how many 1-gallon tanks people sell, I started wanting to scream. Agreed. Just like billion-dollar companies have, for many, many years, thought it's perfectly fine to keep an orca in a swimming pool. Had a roommate years back that kept 2 betta in a small tank and just casually tossed in a new one when one of them magically disappeared or ended up dead. I tried explaining what was going on, but she always said you can't trust the internet, and she trusted her instincts. My instincts over facts. Half the problems of our society are caused by this. My college roommate set up a 30-gallon tank with some gravel and an 8-inch piranha in our dorm while I was gone for the weekend. He wasn't there very often, but would come by and dump 8 to 10 feeder goldfish in the tank once a week. The piranha would kill them, and they'd stink up the room. I found a pet store that was willing to buy it. He gave me $25. I scooped the fish up in a garbage can with a clean bag, sold it and pocketed the $25, and told my roommate the fish died. My brother, a flood many years ago, made fun of me for spending way too much time studying before setting up a fish tank. They're just dumb fish. Sure, they're just fish, but God took them and placed them somewhere else, going at least make sure they enjoy themselves and make sure they're healthy. The idea of keeping goldfish eye bowls was a misconception that has failed to go away. When Europeans first saw goldfish in their native China, they saw them in large glass bowls. What they didn't understand was these fish were kept in ponds and only put in bowls temporarily to show of the best examples. They would then be released back into the ponds. Same. This woman at my church picnic pissed me off one time because she said to her kid, "No, sweetie, we're not getting a goldfish. They old live a week." Yeah, moron, they live a week if you put them in a small bowl and don't take care of them. Also, every time I've gotten a fish from there, they would live long because we took care of them. One lived 9 years. My cousin's fairground goldfish lived for 15 years. I bought my roommate a feeder goldfish. That's what they were advertised as. It cost me like 50 cents or something, and we set him up as best we could. He lived for 9 years and got quite large. Seriously, and goldfish are so expensive. Every time I measure mine, I have to buy a new laptop. They're much less maintenance than most pets if you set the tank up correctly, but that's so seldom the case. I think they're less maintenance than most pets in the sense that you don't really need to walk them or clean a litter box, but they're also a lot easier to kill. And a lot of people don't know that you have to prepare the water before putting them in the tank, and you have to accustom them to it slowly. You can't just dump them in. I've been keeping fish all my life. Recently, my fish have been on a routine feeding schedule, getting food at the same time every day. They know I'll feed them at that time every day. It's interesting to watch new fish learn which side I feed from. They also learn that when the flow shuts off, food is coming. Every fish I add learns this within about a week. Some of my fish are smarter than others. One in particular learned me opening the cabinet door means I'm going to shut off the flow, then feed, and he wants to be first in line, so he'll come out searching after hearing the cabinet open. Catfish are smart. I have seen they can recognize people, but chickens can also recognize people and learn tricks. I think people want to pretend that their food isn't lucid or sentient anyway because it bothers them. I love meat, but I can't ignore that fish or chickens or pigs can't be super smart. Pigs are wicked smart. Bacon is wicked good. I quit eating animals because my blood pressure got too high. IDK what it says about me that I only quit eating intelligent animals for my own personal self-preservation. I stopped eating pork for a long time because I joked if I could potty train it, it's no longer food. I used to joke when I potty trained my kids. Okay, I guess now we don't have to eat them, lol. My goldfish are pretty fucking smart and not only learn tricks, but per me know when they want to eat. I have one that makes a weird sound, spits when it wants food. The people I hear say this the most in my life are people who fish for sport and want to defend it. I have spent the past 20 years or so if I couldn't remember you stabbing me in the face after a short amount of time, it'd be fine for you to do for fun. Lie detectors. They don't actually tell whether or not you're lying. It's just measuring your stress levels. FAK, they're just used as a manipulation tactic, much like televised, e.g., please find my wife appeals, where the police are pretty certain the husband did it and just want to study his body language. If you're asked to take a lie detector test, it's implied to the suspect that saying no makes you look guilty and just makes them anxious and more likely to spill. It's what ultimately got Chris Watts to confess. If you're ever arrested, guilty or not, just say clearly, I want a lawyer now and nothing else. The cops need you to explicitly request a lawyer in order for them to stop any interrogation. Saying things like, I think I should speak to a lawyer, don't count. Okay, but that Chris Watts lie detector test cracks me up. I mean, it isn't funny what happened, or the context, of course, but that woman is so obviously playing him, and it's hilarious to me. The way she's like, wow, you're such a bad liar. That's so great. Thank you for being a bad liar. Teehee. It would be such a bad idea to do this if you killed them. Teehee. And you can just feel the cold sweat break out all over his body. The I totally did it conversation he had with his dad was wild too. Like, it's common knowledge that everything is recorded in rooms like that. Similar with prison cell confessions where someone is on remand but not yet convicted. Keep your mouth shut when in any legal bother, FFS. Cops regularly get handed a slam dunk via, hey, this is a step-by-step account of how I killed my 5 husbands for the life insurance. Style brags to cellmates, who obviously then tattle in order to get good behavior points. Yeah, aside from being a sociopath and a piece of shit family annihilator, Chris Watts is also just not very bright. That truly was the biggest wow factor from watching coverage and documentaries. Something was very wrong with this guy, and also he fucking dumb. Scary, because if he was smarter, he might have gotten away with it. This is the guy caught on his neighbor's ring cam, right? Found it. He was going down no matter what. refuquomospor/www.youtube.com/watch, vu online at youtube-watch. If he had done everything differently, sure, but he wasn't going to lie his way out after it was done. That one neighbor and also Shannon's friend were true MVPs as well. I don't think they would have let up. Very doubtful. Surveillance footage, cheating on his wife, her non-stop social media addiction forcing him to join, motive, opportunity, and the spouse is always number one till completely cleared. He would have to have balls of steel, a great lawyer, and a dumb jury. So, O.J. Simpson scenario, and he doesn't have Johnny Cochran money. Yes, I know he's dead. Motherfucker actually thought he could get away with murdering his wife and 2 kids, 3 if you include the fetus his wife was pregnant with, and that it'd all just go away while he lives his new life with his new girlfriend. Like, what was he thinking? Oh yeah, the cops will just give up in a few days, and that'll be the end of it. And drove his work truck, which he knew to be equipped with GPS, to a work site he was known to visit often, to dump the bodies. Boy was an idiot. Yeah, it's all so ridiculous. I got really into learning about this incident for a while, mostly because the dude lived a few blocks away from where a family member of mine lived around the same time. Somehow, proximity to a murderer makes it more interesting. Hope the guy rots for the rest of his life, given he robbed multiple people of theirs because he didn't like his wife. I wonder if getting a divorce occurred to him as an alternative while he was strangling his little girls. Didn't he also kind of try to not tell his girlfriend that his wife and kids were missing? Like she's not going to find out. It's absolutely fascinating. My wanted level should go down in a couple minutes or so. Thankfully, a vast majority of criminals lack the intelligence required to pull off their schemes successfully or without being caught down the road. Yup, I offered to take one when I was under 21, as my parents and police accused me of something to prove my innocence. The lie detector guy at the police station took me through 3 hours of what I know now was a stress test to watch my reactions and body language. Multiple rounds of him saying, "You're not being honest, you're trying to manipulate the test," where he'd stop the test and we'd have to start over. I'm naturally an anxious person, so I was sweating buckets the whole time. Plus, I was a young, scared teenager, and he mentioned that too. "Why are you sweating so much? Why are you moving so much? Stop trying to manipulate the test results." His reactions to me started escalating, and towards the end he was extremely furious with me and started yelling, "You're lying. Stop lying. The test results clearly show you are lying," just over and over. By that point, I was crying into my hands, desperately trying to make him understand I did not do it, and is there another test I could take to prove my innocence? Like Jesus, what is going on? Like bawling and on the floor while this intimidating detective is yelling at me about lying for 3 hours. Then he stopped and excused himself outside his office to go speak with my mom, who had been waiting for me. He came back and led me to my mom, where I was just waiting to get completely destroyed by her, as she was the one who thought I did it. When I finally looked up from the floor to look at her, she was all smiles, like nothing ever happened. We never spoke about it again. It took me a while to understand, but when the detective went to speak to my mom, he must have said I was innocent because of how I reacted during that session. They're beasts. That's insane. Sorry you had to go through that. Kinda explains why false confessions are a thing, as people reach a point where they'd do anything for it all to just stop, so they say, "Yeah, it was me." 100%. By the end, I was almost convinced I did it. It was wild. There are 4 lights. My first thought as well, although a close second was a legal drama, bull, where someone confessed because they wouldn't give him any water for hours. What did they say you did? I would also like to know this. My parents' house was robbed while they were on vacation, and I was living elsewhere while I was in my rebellious stage. What made it look like I did it was I went to their house the day before the robbery. I knew my folks were gone on vacation, and I was trying to get my last work check that had been sent there instead of where I was staying. My dad always left the basement doors to the outside semi-unlocked in a way that we'd be able to get in. My plan was to go drive to my parents' house, get in through the basement, get my check, and bounce. Well, my dad had completely locked the doors, so I couldn't get it. One of the neighbors saw me walk around the house, check the basement doors, check some of the windows to see if they were open, and leave. The next day, a group of robbers came. They destroyed everything and loaded everything of value into the car that was in the garage and drove off with the car. A neighbor saw that the garage door was open, with the car missing, knowing my folks were on vacation, and called the police. They found the car a few weeks later, wrecked on the highway. Eventually, they caught one guy because the morons ended up drinking our Coca-Cola in drinking glasses and just left them on the living room table with fingerprints. The guy they caught had to keep paying my parents back in small increments from his paycheck source of income up until a few years ago. He was tied to several robberies and violent crimes. So yeah, horrible situation, but I get why I was blamed. It's the sad thing, police can't really solve the problem of how to get a guilty person to confess, but they have learned a lot about how to make an innocent person confess. Yeah, especially the young and mentally deficient. It's like watching torture to me. I have so much empathy for someone who feels like they have to lie to stop the chaos. IDKY. Have a great day. Yeah, there's a reason that those heavy-handed techniques are dying out. In the US, police officers can get confessions by stating they have evidence against you that doesn't exist. Also, if a jury hears a false confession that was made under duress, even if it is later redacted or experts explain why the confession cannot be true, they are highly likely to convict anyway. Yep, there's the prisoner's dilemma too, in cases where there's an alleged accomplice. Cops will say, they're interviewing your mate next door, and he's saying a lot, sort of planting the idea that you should probably confess before your mate, even if you're innocent, in order to avoid things like the death penalty. In reality, there's usually no mate next door. I'd advise anyone over in America to get even a basic understanding of the Reed technique, just so they know what kind of mind games they can expect if they're ever arrested. They use a slightly nicer technique here in the UK called peace, but it's still a lot of manipulation and designed to trip people up. Wow. Just wow. This is even worse than what I'd envisioned. Thank you for sharing this. I think it's really valuable to know what really goes on in these little rooms behind closed doors. Hope you're okay now and have caring people who believe what you say. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm fine now and have a good relationship with my family. It was a weird circumstance where events lined up in such a way where it makes sense why they thought it was me. But damn, did it hurt. That's wild. I guess we know who's the scapegoat in your family. If my mom put me through that, I'd never speak to her again. Not out of anger, even though I would be angry, of course. Rather, when people show you who they really are, believe them. She clearly doesn't trust you or believe in you to the point it needed other people to tell her you were being truthful. Who wants that kind of distrustful influence in their lives? Oh yeah, our relationship was extremely strained for most of my childhood, teens, and 20s. Got away as soon as I was 18. I'm in my 30s now and have come to peace with it all. Spent a lot of time on focusing on and healing myself, and got to a point where no one's words can get to me unless I let them. Now our relationship is great, but that's because I know what it is, I know what it's not, and I just laugh off any absurdities. I'm just gonna say it. Your mom is a bitch. Genuinely, I'm in awe that you stuck to your guns and didn't admit to anything just to get it over with. I know so many people who love to say, I would never admit to something I didn't do, and just draw a hard line thinking that innocent people would never admit to something, and so they must be guilty. But if you haven't been in there and felt the isolation of being with someone screaming at you and telling you how they're going to utterly destroy your life, you cannot understand. You can't understand how when they eventually switch to, if you just plead no contest to this lesser charge, we'll let you go since you're admitting to the error of your ways, seems so fucking reasonable and like some kind of good compromise to get out of that psychological hell. It's 100% barbaric, and people just do not understand unless they've been there. Chris Watt's neighbor needs to be a lead detective at the FBI. Chris went over to the neighbor to talk to him about the mom kids missing, and as soon as the neighbor could separate himself from Chris, he pulled the detectives aside and said, "This dude doesn't say a more than a word to me in passing, but has been rambling at me for the past hour. Something ain't right." Yep, that dude called it within seconds. Absolute legend. I really liked that guy who wound up saving the 3 girls abducted by Ariel Castro. Dude just went to get some McDonald's. Girl comes running full speed at him, leaps in his arms, and he said to the 911 operator, "A pretty white girl comes running into the arms of a random black guy. You know something bad is going down." Another total legend. Also, if in the US, explicitly plead the 5th. I want a lawyer and am pleading the 5th. It was fun watching a smirking Alberto Gonzalez invoke the 5th like 200 times during sworn testimony. Heck of a attorney general there, W. Why can't people be removed from extremely sensitive and powerful positions whose memory is this bad? Especially attorneys? How can a defendant have a fair trial with an attorney who has huge holes in their memory? As opposed to, being guilty of felonies. This is correct. There have been a lot of court decisions that mean you have to be extremely clear. For example, you'd think that the following statement would suffice. This is how I feel. If y'all think I did it, I know that I didn't do it. So why don't you just give me a lawyer, dog? Because this is not what's up. And yet, nonetheless, the defendant argues he invoked his right to counsel. Justice Scott J. Crichton wrote in an opinion concurring with last week's denial. In my view, the defendant's ambiguous and equivocal reference to a lawyer dog does not constitute an invocation of counsel that warrants termination of the interview. Simply remaining silent isn't enough, nor is asking for a lawyer in any way that could be creatively misconstrued to have any wiggle room whatsoever. Many people believe the myth that the police want the truth. They don't. They want to close the case. Wanting to help can land an innocent person in jail. Don't help them. Protect yourself. The justice system would be strong efficient if they did. We don't use them in UK for the exact reason that they're complete bullshit. No one uses them in American courts. Police will pull them out as a scare tactic on defendants, but no jury or judge will accept lie detector results as evidence. A jury might if given the chance, considering how many people think they're accurate. It's just them being inadmissible that keeps prosecutors from doing it. They're actually not admissible in court. They're purely a scare tactic to get confessions. And because of that, never take one, even if you are innocent. They won't help your case, and the cops will often tell you that you failed even if you didn't. Yep, cops are allowed to lie about just about anything to elicit a confession, which is absolutely mental. You're not allowed to lie about evidence in the UK, but in the US, police can just straight up say they found a murder weapon with your prints on it and your DNA in 29 different places on the crime scene. And then people still have the audacity to be amazed that false confessions are a thing. Like George Constanza said, it's not a lie if you believe it. It's almost as if lying was subjective and not a physical state of being.